Today, we'll delve into a short account of the Battle of Gettysburg, a pivotal event in American history. In the summer of 1863, the air was thick with tension and the scent of impending conflict. Confederate General Robert E. Lee, determined and resolute, was preparing to invade the North. His plan was bold and strategic: to draw the Union Army out of its stronghold, disrupt their supply lines, and deliver a crushing blow to their morale. Meanwhile, the Union, under the command of General George G. Meade, braced itself for the imminent clash. Their defensive strategy was simple yet solid: hold the line, protect key points, and repel the invaders. The Union leaders knew the stakes were high, for this was not just a battle for territory, but a battle for the very soul of the nation. Now, with the stage set, the battle lines drawn, let's move to the first day of the battle. The first day of the Battle of Gettysburg, July 1st, 1863, began with a clash between Confederate infantry and Union cavalry. As the sun rose over the Pennsylvania countryside, the air was thick with tension. It was the Confederates who struck first, their infantry marching steadily northward towards the town of Gettysburg. Their initial encounters were with dismounted Union cavalry, who bravely fought off the advancing Confederate forces. These skirmishes were fierce, the air filled with the sound of musket fire and the cries of fallen soldiers. Yet despite their courage, the Union cavalry were eventually forced to retreat under the relentless Confederate assault. The Confederates, buoyed by their early success, pushed forward. As the day wore on, they managed to push the Union forces through the town of Gettysburg itself. But the Union soldiers were not so easily defeated. Even as they retreated, they fought back, slowing the Confederate advance and buying precious time. Meanwhile, Union generals were scrambling to establish a new defensive line. Their chosen ground was Cemetery Hill, a strategically advantageous position to the south of Gettysburg. With its high ground and clear lines of sight, it was a formidable defensive position. As the sun began to set, the Confederates made one final push. But the Union forces, now firmly entrenched on Cemetery Hill, held their ground. The day's fighting ended with a stalemate, the Confederates in control of Gettysburg, but unable to dislodge the Union forces from their strong defensive position. It had been a day of intense fighting, marked by moments of both triumph and despair. The Confederates had achieved a significant victory, taking control of Gettysburg. Yet the Union forces had also shown their resilience, retreating only to establish a formidable defensive line on Cemetery Hill. And so, as the sun set on that first day, the stage was set for the bloody battles to come. The first day ended with the Confederates in control of Gettysburg, but the Union forces held a strong defensive position. Day 2 brought some of the most intense and bloody fighting of the Battle of Gettysburg. As the sun rose on July 2, 1863, the Confederate forces, led by General Robert E. Lee, launched a series of attacks to break the Union line. The first of these assaults was on Devil's Den, a rocky hill on the left flank of the Union line. Confederate sharpshooters took position among the boulders, turning the hill into a deadly shooting gallery. Despite the intensity of the fight, the Union forces managed to hold their ground, but the battle was far from over. Next, the Confederate forces moved towards Little Round Top, a hill of strategic importance, as it overlooked the entire battlefield. The Union forces, recognizing its significance, fought with everything they had. The battle raged on, with soldiers fighting hand-to-hand in some areas. Still, the Union forces, though greatly outnumbered, managed to hold their position. The battlefield then turned to the wheat field and peach orchard. Here, the fighting was fierce and bloody, with control of the field changing hands several times throughout the day. The Confederates, however, were eventually pushed back by Union reinforcements. As the day drew to a close, the Confederates made a final push at Cemetery Ridge. This attack, led by General James Longstreet, was met with strong resistance from the Union forces. Despite the Confederates' best efforts, the Union line held strong. The second day of the Battle of Gettysburg was marked by intense fighting and heavy casualties on both sides. An estimated 6,000 soldiers were killed or wounded on this day alone, making it one of the bloodiest days of the entire Civil War. Yet, despite the ferocity of the Confederate attacks and the heavy losses suffered by the Union forces, the Union line held. On the third and final day of battle, the Confederates made a desperate assault known as Pickett's Charge. In the face of daunting odds, General Robert E. Lee decided to launch a full frontal assault against the Union center at Cemetery Ridge. This daring move would be led by Major General George Pickett and his division of Virginian soldiers, a force of about 15,000 men. The strategy behind the charge was straightforward, if audacious. Lee's plan aimed to crack the Union line right down the middle, effectively splitting the Union forces and causing chaos in their ranks. To do this, Pickett's men would have to cross an open field nearly a mile wide, under heavy artillery and rifle fire. As the afternoon wore on, the Confederate artillery began a bombardment meant to soften up the Union defenses. But the Union artillery replied in kind, and the two sides engaged in an intense artillery duel that lasted for about an hour. Finally, Pickett's men stepped off, marching in tight formation across the open field. The sight of the Confederate line extending a mile wide was a spectacle of military discipline and courage. However, as they advanced, they were met with a hailstorm of bullets and cannon fire. Despite the ferocity of the Union resistance, the Confederates pressed on, with some even reaching the Union lines. However, the Union forces held firm, and the Confederates found themselves in a deadly crossfire. In less than an hour, more than half of Pickett's division had been killed, wounded, or captured. A brief moment of hope was snuffed out as the Union forces counterattacked, driving the Confederates back across the field in disarray. The failure of Pickett's charge was a devastating blow to the Confederate army. The casualty rate was staggering, with Pickett losing over half of his men. The brave but doomed assault had failed to break the Union line, and Lee was forced to order a retreat. Pickett's charge marked the end of the Battle of Gettysburg, with the Confederates in retreat. The gallant but ill-fated charge would go down in history as a pivotal moment in the Civil War, a turning point that marked the beginning of the end for the Confederacy. The Battle of Gettysburg ended on July 3rd, but its impact was far-reaching. This was not merely a three-day conflict, it was a momentous clash that forever altered the course of American history. The echoes of those gunshots, the cries of the fallen, they resonate even today, centuries later. The cost in human lives was staggering. An estimated 51,000 soldiers from both sides were killed, wounded, captured, or went missing. The fields of Gettysburg were turned into a grim tableau, a stark reminder of the price of war. It was the bloodiest battle of the Civil War, a terrible testament to the ferocity of the conflict. But out of the ashes and the blood-soaked soil, a new resolve emerged. The Battle of Gettysburg marked a turning point in the Civil War. The Union's victory here halted the Confederate advance into the North, shifting the momentum of the war. It was a morale boost for the Union, a sign that the tide was starting to turn in their favor. Yet it was not just the military victory that had lasting impact. It was the words of President Abraham Lincoln, spoken a few months later, that gave meaning to the carnage. The Gettysburg Address, delivered by Lincoln at the dedication of the Soldiers' National Cemetery, was a powerful oration that redefined the purpose of the war. In just over 200 words, Lincoln emphasized the idea of a new birth of freedom, a nation unified and strengthened by its trials. His stirring speech gave purpose to the pain, a reason for the sacrifice. The Battle of Gettysburg, though devastating, marked a significant turning point in the Civil War. It was a testament to the indomitable spirit of a nation torn asunder, a nation that would, in time, heal its wounds and stand united. The battle, the losses, the victory, and the words that followed, they all played a part in shaping the nation we know today. In the span of 3 days, the Battle of Gettysburg changed the course of American history. From the preliminary skirmishes on day 1, we saw how the armies of both the Union and the Confederacy tested each other's resolve. The intensity escalated on day 2, with bloody battles painting a vivid portrait of the harsh realities of war. Then, the third day, the climax of this epic battle, saw Pickett's charge, a bold, desperate move by the Confederacy that ultimately failed due to the Union's strategic high ground advantage. And finally, we delved into the aftermath, the physical and emotional toll that this battle took on both sides, forever etching Gettysburg into the annals of American history. In the end, the Battle of Gettysburg was a Union victory that marked a turning point in the Civil War, a testament to strategy, bravery, and the high cost of war.